So welcome to the People Performance Podcast, where we discuss all things people performance. The People Performance Podcast is made up of 3 series. First up, we have the Leader Lounge episodes with me, the founder. Then we have the guest interview episodes. And finally, we have the performance episodes delivered by the T2 consultants. If, after listening to our podcast, you want to get in touch with T2 about anything we do, please contact us at help@trans2performance.com. You can stream or listen to our podcast on all the usual platforms available. So for now, sit back, tune in, and enjoy the People Performance Podcast.
Coming up on this episode.
I would even argue, just thinking, that is it one of the most important, there's probably loads of variables in there in terms of what people will value. But for me, that's the one that gets me the first. If that's not there, then my opinion of that person goes out the window.
Some people might be listening to this who are a leader who go, well, I'm not the most confident person in the world. Does that mean I don't have executive presence?
It's harder for them to get my respect immediately if it looks like they've not made an effort.
That would catch the eye of people, and would people frown upon that?
Hello and welcome to the People Performance Podcast with me, Tracy Roberts.
And me, Martin Johnson.
What are we getting into today, Martin?
Oh, a good topic today, Tracy. It's a topic that I've been discussing a lot with clients at the minute at an executive level, and it's the concept of executive presence.
Ooh, now that gets bandied about a bit, doesn't it?
It does, and it's important, but quite often I find for people, they don't really know what it is, or they can't quite quantify it. So it's, this person has executive presence, or this person needs more executive presence. However, what we want to discuss on this podcast, I think, is what is executive presence? What does that mean? What constitutes it? And for the listeners to probably think, if you're in a position where you need to influence, lead, or empower, how do you stack up against these elements of executive presence? I think that would be a really good conversation to have.
Definitely, because I think I agree with you. I think people's perception of it's different. I akin it to like people's understanding of trust. There's a kind of basis of what we think it is, but then actually everybody's narrative on it's slightly different. So it's the variables that sit within it that you can go. And I guess it's a little bit subjective as well, because you might link into some of the things we're going to talk about. And because you really value that in someone, you will immediately say they have executive presence, but you've maybe not considered some of the other variables that maybe doesn't bolster that, if that makes sense.
I think what you've described there is sort of relevant for 99% of the things we do in any form of leadership, psychology, team dynamics. It's absolutely subjective. We're all different humans. We're all wired in different ways, and we all value different things because we have different motivations, different value systems, different views of the world. And so when it comes to trust, like when we always have asked those question cards, how do you define success or how do you define trust? You will get 100 different answers, because that's what trust means to them, or that's what success means to them. Executive presence could be the same. You know, what you deem as executive presence in a person might slightly differ to others, but what we're going to do today is we're going to look at all the research and data and the most common trends that are universally sort of relevant and understood to constitute executive presence, because there are just some things that are non-negotiable, I would have thought. So I think if we explore them, but I think you make a good point, it is subjective slightly as well.
Yeah, but I think it's good to get granular with it, because I guess from both perspectives, it's one about understanding if you want to, we're going to use the term increase your executive presence. There's more variables in it than you realise. But also for people who are making assumptions about executive presence, that you're putting this person on a pedestal, maybe it's good for them to sense check it a little bit as well and think, yeah, okay, I do see an abundance of this kind of variable, but actually now I think about it, this stuff isn't in place for me. So yeah, I think it's good to give both perspectives on that.
Well, I've been brave, Tracy, and I've scored myself self-analysis, and it'd be interesting because when we go through it, I'll ask you to score me live.
God.
And let's see.
I might not have a job by the end of this.
You know what I'll do? I'll score you, and we'll go like that. However, before we get to that point, it might be a great starting point to define executive presence from a T2 perspective, having looked at all of the data that's out there, all of our own leadership curriculum and our observations of what we see in some of the more, let's say, leaders and executives who demonstrate some of these qualities with their teams. Our definition is short and sweet, but it sort of encapsulates the essence of executive
Yeah,
presence. So, executive presence refers to the qualities, characteristics, and behaviors that make a leader present as confident, capable, and influential. In turn, this inspires trust and respect from others.
I like that.
So it's the qualities, characteristics, and behaviors that allow a leader to present as confident, capable, and influential. In turn, that inspires trust and respect from others.
Yeah, I think those words are really key because I think then if you think about what you're observing in people, that is what you're looking for, but it's how they display it. And confidence can look different to everyone, I guess, as well. So again, good to get into actually how that can display in different ways because it's not a one size fits all. It's definitely more around how you, as an example, the confidence, how you convey confidence because people do that in different ways, don't they? So
And I'm going to say my first sort of, not contentious, but my first thing on the podcast that people may find hard to digest with this. The three words used in that definition are confident, capable, and influential. Some people might be listening to this who are a leader who go, well, I'm not the most confident person in the world. Does that mean I don't have executive presence? They might be very capable, but let me say something. In the absence of a level of confidence, and the descriptor of confidence is interesting because it doesn't mean the loud, brash, outgoing, jazz hands type people. Confidence can come in many different guises for introverts, extroverts, etc. But in the absence of confidence, your executive presence is going to suffer. So you need it.
yeah,
It's just how you're viewing confidence. A lot of people say to me, well, I'm not a confident leader. And what they're sort of saying, Tracy, is I'm not an extroverted leader. The two are different.
yeah, I mean, it's conviction, I think. Is that the word? That lines up with confidence. So, like, you can be an introverted leader and still have conviction.
Of course you can.
And that in the conviction side becomes your confidence because, you don't have to go out there with a megaphone and tell people where to go, but you having the ability to discern information and communicate really clearly and say, that's what we're doing is very different. I'd actually argue that for some leaders, they maybe think their confidence is high, but is it real confidence? Are they high? Is there a little bit of something that sits behind that makes them question themselves sometimes? Maybe because they're more extroverted and they're maybe not taking time to get as into the details sometimes. So maybe that catches them out from time to time. So there's definitely a way to kind of consider both sides there.
But it would be safe to say that all leaders want to have executive presence to some degree. Everybody would like to display that confidence. Everybody wants to demonstrate they are capable. And the art of any leadership position is you need to be able to influence other people and outcomes. So it matters. It really matters. And yeah, I think what would be good is for us to go through the six main areas, and there's lots of things within these six areas, as we'll cover, that people need to start thinking about when it comes to how other people are judging you against executive presence. What is it that contributes towards that very often subconscious scoring in the
It's a
mind of
bias,
others?
isn't it? It's
Yeah,
what you're looking for.
I call it a score because that's what it is. Imagine that you're going through life and every single person you work with or who works for you is subconsciously, whether they know it or not, scoring you on a set of criteria that will ultimately give them their judgment of executive presence on you.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that, if you're aware of that, you can affect your score. If you work on some stuff or you bring some stuff into the conscious, you can increase that executive presence score.
Yeah.
So let's start with the first one, contribution score. Your contribution score is how others subconsciously analyze and rate the impact and quality of your contributions in meetings, discussions, and situations. Things like vocabulary, volume, pace, pitch, and tone, and clarity all form part of your contribution score, as do things like great storytelling, the ability to connect emotionally, novelly, and memorably. Now, what's probably also in this contribution score is body language and nonverbals, posture, the use of nonverbals.
That can make or break you, can't it? You can tell a story, but look, not very engaged as well. I quite like the fact that there's a bit of a, like, clear kind of definition there that talks around the quality of what you're saying as well as just the quantity of what you're saying. Because I guess we've all came across those leaders in the past that can do a Winston Churchill speech every Monday at 1 o'clock, but actually it makes no difference. It's the same thing that you're hearing all the time. But actually, the absolute quality in what people say, and I guess that goes back to what we were saying around introverted leaders a little bit as well. It's not that they're talking all the time; it's what they say, how they say it, and you know, I guess it might be even just a question you drop in the room sometimes. Because God, what an impact that's just had. It's not about you coming into the room and owning it every time. In actual fact, sometimes it's just about the great questions you ask, isn't it? Because that's your contribution. So I like there's a definition that kind of defines the two areas.
And it's, if you think about those things I just said, you can break them into two categories. You've got the delivery of what you do, which is vocabulary, volume, pace, pitch, tone, and clarity. And then you've got the impact that it has on others,
Yeah,
emotional, novel, memorable,
love that.
right? So contribution score is how you deliver your contribution, both verbal and non-verbal. And then the second element of it is the impact it has on others. And so
That's so important for people to realise that, isn't it?
it
That
is.
you could have a 50% score there by just talking a load of rubbish.
Yeah.
If it doesn't land in the right way, or actually it lands in the wrong way.
Well, what's interesting, let's take vocabulary for example. I often find, and it's backed up by what you see out there in the data, is people think that a smarter, more deep, more breadth vocabulary builds executive presence. It's not always the case. If you get too clever with it, or you're too intellectual, and you are bamboozling people with clever words and vernacular, it actually confuses people and it switches people off. It can actually make them feel inferior.
Yeah, definitely.
So the thing with vocabulary is have a strong vocabulary, but be clear and concise and keep it simple. It needs to land. Like we said there, the value of it landing needs to happen. So you can't get too clever with it. We've seen it before where there's very, very intelligent leaders, very educated, huge, wide vocabulary, and they're saying words that certain people in the team do not understand,
Well, they can't connect with
or
it.
they can't connect with
Yeah.
it. And so you've got to, when it comes to vocabulary, for example, with executive presence, there's a sweet spot where it says your vocabulary is developed and it's intelligent enough, but it's delivered with such clear clarity and the choice of words are so important that it lands with people.
So it's reading the room, isn't it, sometimes? I mean, even if we just go back to, I guess, the basics of what we do, we enter certain rooms, we know exactly where to pitch our vocabulary and how we're going to land things. And it's no different when it comes to leadership. It's having, I guess, the right vocabulary, if it's clear and concise, gives you confidence in that person. And I guess it allows you to think, yeah, it sounds like they know what they're doing. But if you're using words where people can't connect, then they kind of leave the room more confused than they went in. So, yeah, I like the fact that we're discussing a sweet spot there because it is really about that room that you walk into, isn't it?
So think about your contribution score. I mean, the last bit I want to mention before we move on to the next one, T, is I mentioned storytelling.
Yes.
I'm a fundamental believer that not just in leadership, but in life, the great influencers, the people that other people gravitate towards, where influence truly comes from at times is the ability to storytell. And I know you do a lot of this in the speaking with clarity and clarity and influence,
Clarity and confidence.
communicating clarity and confidence course that we do, which you can talk more about at the end. But how important is storytelling?
I think it's really important because our brains are naturally storytellers. So if our brains connect very quickly with what you're saying, then clearly it lands, I guess, more like solidly in our minds, and we're able to kind of envisage what part of that story we're in, whether it's we're taking it in and we're referring it to something we've experienced, so we get that kind of connection. Or actually, if we're storytelling in the instance of trying to take people on a journey as a leader, then we immediately put ourselves into the narrative of that book. So it's really important. What I would say though is I think it can go the other way. I think some people are very good at storytelling but not landing a point at times. So they'll go round, they'll try too much to soften the edges and take people on a journey. And then therefore the vision and all those other things kind of gets lost in all the plot, if that makes sense. So I do think that's a sweet spot too to some people.
So before we move on then, I scored myself out of 5, 5 being excellent, 1 being poor, 3 being average, etc. for contribution score. Shall I ask you first before I
It's a difficult one, that. I'm going to say 4 or 4.5.
I scored myself a 4.
Yeah.
And the reason I did is because I do feel quite confident that in many of these the elements within contribution score that play to my strengths. But the reason I scored myself a 4 and didn't go any further up is because there was one element of it that sometimes I don't get right, which was tone.
Yeah, okay.
I
I'll
think
I'll back you up on that one.
I think
Is that where I give a knowing look to the camera?
vocabulary, volume, pace, pitch, and clarity usually,
Yeah.
but the tone of which, depending on which I'll come to on personality next, but the tone of which sometimes messages can be delivered is up and down. It's erratic. It's volatile.
Yeah, okay. I get where you're going with that. And that makes a lot of sense. But again, I think that's something that people can think about, because even if you're clear, sometimes that's the thing that breaks it, isn't it? So it is worth thinking about that. It's quite a big element.
So let's go on to the second element. So the first one is contribution score. The second element of the 6 that will form executive presence is personality score. Now, this is the reason why we do a lot of the work we do here at T2 to get people to uncover the inner workings of their personality and how they're showing up. So your personality score is how your natural personality type, behaviours, motivators, and attributes affect your executive presence. For example, knowing where to dial aspects of your personality up and down, depending on the context and situation, can be hugely impactful on a person's executive presence, just as not adjusting them can equally be detrimental.
Yeah, I think this is a big. I mean, we work on this, like you said, it's bread and butter stuff for us, but this is an everyday thing. People think that they formulate this magical. This is my leadership equation, if you like. This is what I do all the time. I go into a business, I do it this way, and I leave. And quite often, that isn't always the way to do it. So adjusting to every environment that you're in is actually quite a massive thing that people will observe in you. In that room, in that situation, how did they adjust their personality to suit that situation? And we do get leaders that come in. I don't think we have as many people thinking like this now that say, "Well, this is my leadership style. This is what I do," and it's served me well so far. But obviously the conversation we have to have there is, but has that worked in every room that you've ever been in, and will it serve you well in the future? So I think people are becoming a lot more aware of this side of things, and they're conscious. They might say, "Oh, that's just that person. They just do that in that situation." That might affect their personality score, because in other people's opinions, they don't seem to adjust to the room. But I guess that's just in terms of leadership. But there's also a little bit of authenticity in there, a little bit as well, isn't
There
there?
is. When I say dialing up and down as well, it's important that to state that all human beings can develop and build executive presence. But let's split the personality score on two sides of the fence. You've probably got your more introverted, amiable, humanistic, considered, empathetic, compassionate characters naturally as a personality. And you've then got your potentially more driven, more extroverted, more direct, more assertive type of characters. So I'm on the second half in my personality type. And traditionally in history, that group, assertive, driven, directive, extroverted, confident, they would generally, under the descriptor of executive presence, naturally display more than the first group, right? And but we're entering an era now through generational shift and through evolution where there's other qualities at stake here which are coming into executive presence. The ability to be calm, collected, and have poise, the ability to listen, the ability to be empathetic, is equally as important at times and contributes towards this personality
Yeah.
score. And so you can't just get away with anymore going, "I've got all the good stuff. I'm strong. I stand on my feet. I'm a great communicator. I'm decisive. I'm firm." Yes, they're all qualities that will contribute towards it, but it's only half of the picture. And so I scored myself a 3 on this because I think my personality, when I uncover everything from attributes, is so stacked on that left-hand side of assertive, confident, clarity, results, all of that type of stuff, that there's a huge part of the executive presence there for me that's through the roof. But I have to constantly dial up other sides. So the balance is created.
Yeah.
And when I think of words as composure and poise, That's definitely something that I need to work
Well,
on,
I see
and
what you
definitely
mean.
things in certain situations where I need to improve upon. So I think when you think about your personality, think about what your default is, because if you're on the calm, composed, poised, compassionate, empathetic, humanistic side, you probably need to dial up some of that assertiveness and some of that dominance and some of that, presence. So I scored myself a 3 because I think I have half of it in abundance, and the other half I need to, constantly work on, if that makes sense.
It'd be really hard to get them both in check all the time, though. So I think it's probably worth saying, like, having 100% commitment to always having that balance is difficult, but it's very useful to know which side you tend to deviate towards.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, let's move on to the third element, which is credibility score.
Okay.
I think when we've worked with leaders and teams, I pick up that this is really, really important part of overall executive presence, how people judge executive presence. Your credibility score is formed based on how others rate your levels of knowledge, experience, and competence. If people rate you highly in these areas, it is likely to directly result in you displaying a higher level of executive presence.
Okay.
Credibility is, what's your experience? Where have you been? What have you done? And have you got time in the wicket to
Yeah.
an experience to pull upon?
Yeah.
What's your knowledge like? How much do you know, right? And what's your competence and how good are you at actually delivering and executing? And I think you look at that, and whether you like it or not as leaders, if someone doesn't deem you credible from the very outset, you will struggle in their minds with executive presence, and you will struggle to lead them.
Yeah.
And that might be tough because you might have all of the other stuff in abundance. Your personality score's high, your contribution score's great, but if you've never done the job before and you've never operated at this level before and you don't have any knowledge, your executive presence score is going to dip. Does that make sense? And
Yeah,
and
it totally
and you
does.
can learn this stuff, you can build the knowledge, you can build the experience, but if you don't have it at that moment in time, it could affect executive presence.
I definitely think it can affect it. What I was just thinking as we were talking there was you're going to come in naturally at a lower number. So kind of on the back foot if you're walking, because how many leaders do you meet that go, I'm going into a manager team in a new sector, don't actually know I'm a very good, I don't know, COO, but I'm in a new sector, I'm learning things, I'm kind of leaning into people's expertise. And therefore I do feel this feels lower for me. However, what I think pushes that up is immediately plugging in humility.
Yes.
If you plug humility in straight away, people go, they know they don't know, but they want to learn.
Well, let me add something to that. Humility and vulnerability, because they're two different things. So just for the listeners, humility is the attribute of you are well aware of your strengths, but your gaps and your areas to build on. You are self-conscious of it and you are accurately aware of it.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is to the degree of which you are willing to show that to others and share it with others. So yeah, if you come into it with humility, as in you accurately assess, I don't have the knowledge in this area,
But I know you do.
but I know you do.
Yeah.
I've not got all of the expertise to be able to do this. But if I have humility and I'm aware of that, and I have vulnerability and I'm willing to share it with you,
Yeah.
then actually my executive presence can still go up. It's a
And
great
then
point.
I'm going to plug in another ability, if that's okay. Learnability.
Yeah.
We plug learnability in at the end of that, then that's going to show that you have care and curiosity and that you want to apply it. So if you're not sitting there in the moment, taking information and doing nothing with it, being passive, you're going, right, how do I use this information to make sure I do affect this score a little bit more in the future? So definitely, again, really good points in there because it's not about walking in there on the back foot and having no say until you've got 6 months experience. There's definitely ways you can get that score up.
Yeah. So before we move on, what would you score me on this, T?
Credibility,
Yeah.
5.
Yeah, well, I did, and I
Of course he did.
and I don't want to be. It's awful putting a 5 down, isn't it? Because you think,
I'm
well,
really glad I said 5 and not 3.
it's really difficult putting that, but it was the one that I came to of the 5 where I actually went, you know what? No, yeah, I think
Yeah.
I can say that about myself. Certainly, given that I've been doing this 2 decades, and I'm the founder of the organization. But
I would 100% give you a 5. And I'm going to be brave and say I'd give myself a 5 on that.
yeah, I think you would be high on that. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Right, next one. 5. Number 5, executive score. Sorry, execution score.
Execution.
This is what happens when you read from your own notes. Execution score. So your execution score reflects the level of confidence others have in your ability to drive accountability, manage performance, and deliver results. This in turn elevates your level of executive presence and gravitas. So this is not so much about you being able to deliver and execute. That's in your credibility score. This is, as a leader, your ability to ensure that other people execute,
Yes.
and therefore you will make sure that you drive accountability, manage performance, and therefore ensure results are being delivered. Now, I also think that this is one of the elements where if people aren't strong on this, other people quickly see it and lose faith in you as a leader.
Yeah.
If you are tolerating continuous underperformance, poor behaviours, whatever it might be, and you don't address it, and therefore we're not succeeding in our endeavours, your executive presence can dip.
I would even argue, just thinking, that is it one of the most important, like there's probably loads of variables in there in terms of what people will value, but for me, that's the one that gets me the first, first. If that's not there, then my opinion of that person goes out the window. I can be here on personality and communication and all those things, but ultimately we're here to do a job. So the way my eyes work is, can you make this happen? And for me, that's a big one.
These are intrinsically linked up, because if we go back to personality score, if you were heavily on the humanistic, caring, compassionate, introverted, amiable side, this might not be comfortable, this execution score for you, because calling out underperformance, holding people to account, driving results, that might not lend itself naturally to your personality. And so they're absolutely linked. But the execution score is an important part of the 6 elements, because it's you will maintain your executive presence if you are not afraid to drive accountability, call out performance, and drive results. Right, the 6th and final one, productivity score. So your productivity score reflects how well you utilize time, resources, and how effective you are at making decisions and delegating tasks. This possesses the ability to elevate or reduce your executive presence. So how efficient are you? Have you got your ducks in a row? Do you manage your time? Are you reliable?
Yeah.
Can you delegate effectively? Do you structure and drive great meetings? All of this stuff, that makes you a productive person, which then elevates your level of executive presence.
Yeah, because this is, again, you're absolutely right. It's all intrinsically linked, 100%. But if you think about what that means, is this person a busy fool? Are they juggling loads of things, or actually are they knowing what to prioritize? Guess there's a link in there again to not just decision making and delegation, but discernment of what's most important, what they have to focus on, who they have to focus on. Because in certain jobs, I can definitely say at the top from experience of this, everybody wants you. So you've got to be able to disseminate very quickly where to spend your time. And I think people can pick up on that very quickly, can't they? And I love that you used meetings as a good example, because for me, that is a very quick sign of how many ducks people have got in a row, or if it's just, a load of geese going off to a distant land. Because meetings are super important, and can waste a lot of time, and people's soul gets lost in there. So if people can hold that together, make sure we come out with something at the end, and hold people accountable, so it goes back to the previous conversation, that's definitely going to give you some indication as to how, I guess, how much that affects this person's executive presence.
Yeah. And again, I scored myself a 4 on this, but it was a generous 4. I think I can be really productive,
Yeah.
and I can manage my time and focus on priorities, and quite often do.
But you do like shiny things.
But I can, I can get distracted, and I can then get, my eyes on the prize and drift off somewhere else very quickly. And so I think there's definitely work to be done on that.
Yeah.
So there's the 5 elements of the executive presence. I said 6 originally, but it was 5, wasn't it? Contribution score number 1,
Mhm.
how you present, interact, show up with your verbals and non-verbals, how you contribute in situations. Your personality score, your natural behaviours, motivations, and attributes, and how that lends itself to how you show up. Your credibility score, your knowledge, experience, and expertise and competence. Your execution score, your ability to get stuff done or ensure
Yeah.
results are achieved and things are done. And productivity score, how efficient, productive, and reliable you are to others within organizations and teams.
Yeah.
And so think about that. Think about those elements of executive presence and think about how you stack up. I've done a quick self-assessment, but I'm sure the best way of doing this would be to send a survey out to my team with a load of questions in each area and say, answer these on Martin and give me some honest feedback. In fact,
The ultimate 360, really.
breaking news, I know we do Leadership 360s, which is slightly different, but Lydia's actually developing an assessment for executive presence alone, which we can communicate to people when it's done, if you're interested in taking the test. Before we finish up this podcast, though, T, I think it's probably worth going into a final bit of the conversation around what kills executive presence. We've talked about, what makes executive presence and what absolutely contributes towards it, but there's certain things that can kill it off very quickly or can diminish it. And you might just say, well, it's the opposite of all those 5 areas you just spoke about. But I think we want to get a bit specific with this, and then we can, I've written 5 down, but there's probably 25, probably more. So the first one I wrote is poor communication. And what I meant by this was when there's no goals, no direction, rambling and waffling, unclear or uncertain communication.
Yeah.
I mean, surely that's the antidote of executive presence.
Yeah. And I guess just thinking about like ramblings, ramblings are good. I can literally think of 2 or 3 people I've worked with immediately when you say that word, where you're trying to get clarity. And for me, the one thing that stands out to me there is people can be talking at you, but then they leave and you go, was I supposed to do something with that or not?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Was there an outcome to that?
Yeah, like so I'm really glad, and it could be linked to bad storytelling actually, blah, 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 okay. And then I've had leaders come back and go, so did you do X? And I go, I didn't even realise it was an action. I thought that was a discussion. So the rambling element and obviously maybe the opposite side of storytelling, definitely.
I mean, in all our time, we've been doing this for over a decade now, T. There's so many executive teams we've worked with where you have those moments where you sit and observe a meeting or you observe a 45-minute discussion on something and it goes nowhere. In fact, it goes down rabbit holes, it goes in different directions, and then at the end of it, no decision's been taken, no action has been established. There was no point to it. And I just think, like, how many conversations like that are going on in organizations, and it's just poor. And a good leader with executive presence will recognize this is happening and intervene and say, well, stop. What are we trying to achieve here? Or I'm going to make a decision now because we're getting nowhere. Decision made. Are we all behind it?
Yeah.
A good leader recognizes when that's happening. But if the leader themselves or the person who's in the most senior position is taking part in that and sometimes driving it, it's a huge problem. Huge problem.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Which links into number 2, poor listening.
What?
I love it. Poor listening, interrupting, not acknowledging, or being defensive, or just even worse, disengaging on phones, on laptops, walking out the room, taking calls. I mean,
I'm visualizing loads of people that do that I've worked with. I'd even say that another side of that is walking into a room, feigning that you want consensus in a situation or a blue sky thinking session, but already knowing what you want and leading people that way. Does that make sense?
yes, yeah.
So it's like fake consensus building. That's the worst scenario. But you're absolutely right. It can also be sitting in a meeting and choosing when to intervene and not listening and taking control of it even in certain situations.
Coming back to the point you just made, a good leader with executive presence would be strong enough to say, I know you want a meeting about this and I know you want to brainstorm and everything. However, I need to let you know that I've made this decision and we're going in this direction for these reasons.
So here's the things we can discuss.
And I need you behind me, but I don't want to waste your time because it would be, what did you call it? False
consensus
false
building.
consensus. I don't want to think of that. Our hands are tied. The
Yeah.
Matrix has decided X. I know we'd love to debate it, but there's nothing we can do here. Decision made.
Here's the reasons why,
And can we
and
move on?
here's what I can tell you, and all those things.
That would be someone with conviction and strong executive presence. They're not going to waste somebody's time or appease people with false
You still get a
consensus.
consensus because people go, okay, we're in it together. And that's the difference. We might have to go through a bit of a change kind of like process in our head at that point, but at least we can move forward.
Yeah. Okay, number 3, weak conviction. So what I mean by this is weak conviction is when you are not standing by your decisions. You're then being easily convinced and scuppered and talked out of it,
Are we talking about the UK government?
or or you're unable to make a decision. So if you show executive presence, you say, look, I understand your concerns, I know this, but our hands are tied, this decision is made, I need you behind me. And then some strong character in the room goes, hang on a second, and starts challenging and a bit, and then you start U-turning from that in front of the group because you're easily swayed by the strong characters or whatever it might be. That's not good either. As much as we want to be listening and where we can and we want to be collaborative, if you've made a decision, stand by it. Unless there's data and evidence or something emerges that says, hang on a second, we got that wrong, then you've got to be brave enough to listen to people. But you can't do it all the time. We know those leaders where they just get easily talked down, or they doubt themselves because they get challenged on stuff time and time again. Sometimes you've got to have some conviction.
And they don't, I know this sounds awful, but it also links into that vulnerability and honesty piece, doesn't it? Because you can have a leader who's discerned very quickly, because there is a difference between discernment and decision making. You can make decision making very quickly, but discernment is definitely a skill that people, have to kind of work on. But even if you have made the wrong decision and you have to U-turn because of data or whatever it is, how do you communicate that you've made that mistake and be clear about why you're changing your mind? Does that make sense?
Or you don't even have to say it's a mistake. You say, look, at the time we made this decision because this was the evidence, data and facts we were working with, and it was the right decision at the time. However, now, because of what we've discovered or we know, we're confident that we need to make another decision.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine.
I don't think that happens enough, does it?
Doesn't.
Because
Because they take it as personal failure. This is making me look bad.
and it becomes a change project that we shall never speak of again. And yeah.
Number 4, conflict aversion. So what can kill executive presence is not having the bravery to even have the tough conversations or call out that underperformance. It links in to that execution score of getting stuff done. But if you're overly, shy of conflict, or you don't like it, and therefore you don't have the tough conversations you need to have, people will spot that incredibly quickly around you.
Yeah.
And they will get frustrated that you are not doing anything about this. And so whether you're someone who doesn't mind conflict, like myself, you've got to think how you do it, number 1. If you're somebody that doesn't like it, you've got to push into it.
You do.
But you can't avoid it. Executive presence requires people in senior positions to step up and call stuff out if it's not working or if things aren't happening. How you do it is important, but you've still got to do it.
Yeah. And a lot of the time it's excusing poor behaviours, etc., which has a knock-on effect in itself, doesn't it?
And usually it's not even around skills and competence. More often than not, it will be around behaviours, what we are willing to accept in the environment versus not. And the final one, before we can summarise and wrap up, and it might be a controversial one, but I've read so much about it, and I think we've got to put it out there because even still today it matters. We know everything we know about psychology and first impressions and how the brain works and how we're constantly judging friend or foe, like, dislike, in or out. Whether we like it or not, what people see and observe forms a larger part of their opinion of you. And so what kills executive presence could be personal grooming, appearance and posture. How you present, your attire, your personal hygiene, your personal standards, right? It matters. And, you got to think about that. Now, we had this conversation off camera, didn't we, that when I left the military, I'd spent, like you, my entire 6-year period in a suit. And not only in a uniform, but in the
ironing evidence at A4.
And in the uniform, they told you had to be in every single day for different tasks and activities, which is fine. And there's a value to that. And I remember the positives of that. And then I came out of the military and I went into the corporate world and I worked for a smaller consultancy company where it was suit, tie,
Yeah.
etc. And then I went into a large global organization, Gartner, and you had to wear suit, shoes, tie, shirt, buttoned up. Even if you was internal and there were no client meetings, it was expected that you showed up
Yeah.
like that. The world's moved on a lot, T. And a lot of organizational cultures have moved on, and we don't over-index. In fact, wearing suits and ties now are probably more rare than common,
Yeah, it's
unless you're in
unusual.
certain industries, banking, law, whatever it might be. But and I dress now in t-shirts and combats and whatever. Obviously, if I go to a certain gig, however, or I'm on a stage, I wouldn't rock on the stage in a pair of shorts and trainers because I still try to be appropriate for the environment I'm going into.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it?
But even if I'm in my t-shirts or my polo shirts, I'm still thinking about, is it smart? I still want to present well. I still want to show up well. It still needs to be ironed. It still needs to be washed. I still need to smell nice. I still need to. And so I think it matters to people because there's an element of judgment, isn't there, where scruffy, tardy people, it affects that credibility score and all the rest of it in their minds. And so I still think you said something though in the conversation. You said, when I talked about standards, grooming and hygiene, you said, yeah, but that's different to style.
I think, yeah, it's different to style, but it's also different to generational opinions, isn't it? So we were saying how there's two things that are kind of like, against each other. And I'm going to throw a word in there, pride. I think pride is linked to that last point there. So if people look like they've made a pride, it doesn't matter if they don't have the most expensive suit or all those things. It's they've made the effort to have some pride in how they appear in that room. And for me, that's what I see in that person. It's not like, is that a really expensive Hugo Boss suit or whatever it is? It's just that they've taken that time to walk in and stand tall and they're groomed, and they're right for the audience. But you're absolutely
Do you
right.
think the more senior, the more rich, the more successful people get, the more they care less? So, for example, you look at Elon Musk. He is the richest man in the world. He's run multiple businesses. Could be on paper, you would say, the most successful person in business ever. And he would rock up in a cap, a t-shirt, and a pair of jeans. And he's even been seen smoking weed on podcasts. I mean, I know this is a far-fetched example, but
No, but it's the truth. There's research around it.
he's clearly gone, I don't need to impress, right? But there's many people still out there today where if the CEO walked into the workplace in shorts and t-shirt, that would catch the eye of people, and would people frown upon that?
There's a cultural element to that, actually, and there's some research that supports that around, I think it's the Hosted research that talks about the cultural stuff that we're working on at the minute, the dimensions, and there's a link with that, actually. So in certain countries, if you did walk in shorts, you would be viewed, people would not respect you because because it's so hierarchical. And
Because you haven't read the cultural norm.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's maybe a little bit of that in some
Whereas if you
sector.
worked in the senior team in Tesla, it might be acceptable for you to come in shorts, t-shirt and a cap because Elon and all the senior leadership team do it. And so that's the cultural norm, right? So I guess what we're saying there is it does matter. Personal attire, grooming, appearance does matter. It goes towards executive presence, but it's sort of attached to the cultural norm.
Definitely, and I guess what you're trying to throw out in the world, that's what I think. When you walk into that room, what is it you're trying to? I think I said on a previous podcast around this sort of thing that had my mind change very quickly through people showing up and not giving me that last, because I do think that is a big. I think maybe it's the military in me because I look for clean shoes. I'm one of those people, but it's harder for them to get my respect immediately if it looks like they've not made an effort. I think effort and pride is probably the two words I'd throw in there, but it's relevant to that situation, isn't it?
Yeah, I like it. Well, let's wrap this up, T. Executive presence is an interesting topic. I hope it's been useful for our listeners. None of us, no human, possesses a 5 out of 5 score on every element. It'd be a little bit schizophrenic and psychopathic.
Like up and down in your career, I would argue. Like if you change roles and you're going to have to work on those things constantly, aren't you?
And so, but the different elements of it. And, it matters though, because remember the definition of executive presence. If you have some degree of it or a reasonably high degree of it, it's going to build trust and respect from others. because people are subconsciously looking at your qualities, characteristics, and behaviors, right? And they're saying, is my leader confident, capable, and influential? Do I want to follow? Do they make me feel in a certain way? Am I healthily on my toes, but also cared for, right? Do I value what they say? Are they knowledgeable and smart and credible? Do they call out and not tolerate underperformance? All of these things they're subconsciously observing and watching. And if we're doing those things, and if people are making a good job of those things, then trust and respect goes through the roof.
Yeah.
And so that's the importance of it. And it's just worth thinking about, isn't it? Maybe we'll follow up with this with a couple of pathways on the hub, but might be good to get Lydia to do one of those quick tests based on the 5 elements and some of the questions within.
I would argue that bringing this into your conscious, part of your life is the way to make. If people are subconsciously assessing you, if you make it conscious to dial into those things, I think immediately you can make a difference.
And just remind us before we sign off, T, we've launched a leadership development program for September, which is, I'm going to call it an open course, because what we do here at T2 is we work with clients on their projects with their teams, and every client and project is unique. But what we're starting to do a little bit more now is saying, wouldn't it be great if we could do some open programs where multiple leaders from different organizations can come together and go through a program of work together to improve on some of the things we've been talking about today, and also best practice share and learn from each other. So that kicks off in September. Do you just want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it kicks off in September. We have done these previously, and the benefit to having it is, as you said, it's really great to come in with a team of people from the same place that you work, but you're going to be talking the same language. The benefits coming on an open module is a little bit more flexibility in that for a start, but you do get to hear loads of different experiences from around the room. And in the past workshops we've held, that's really where the big benefits have came, because they're actually sharing experiences from different sectors, and as a consequence they're getting not just our take on things and our models, they're going away thinking, actually I've got it quite good compared to that sector, or that was a great idea, I could plug that in. So this particular program is 4 workshops. It's kind of split down into I think it's 6 weekly kind of periods. And the idea of it is that within those 4 workshops that you attend, you will get an array of tools that will allow you to go back to the workplace and apply lots of the stuff that we've been talking around today in terms of your executive presence. Particularly in the last workshop, we have got communicating with clarity and confidence. But running up to that, we give you all the tools to think about yourself, how you exhibit yourself, how you utilize your natural personality traits and your motivations, how we apply it to other people, because that's really important. Because situational leadership, I think people think they understand what that means, but until they've kind of looked at themselves in detail, you can't really authentically do that. So we take them through a journey on that. And actually, there's a couple of things that were covered in there. We do a leading productively session as well, again, which ties into some of those key areas there, to allow people to think about, it's not just about what you say, your kind of self-awareness, it's about how you plug it in and actually do something with it as well. So all the things we've been talking about today will be covered on those 4 workshops. The beauty of it is you've got a little bit of space in between to go and plug and play and come back with some hints and tips for other people of things that you've tried to do, maybe come with some problems that we can solve together. And the best bit about it is it's here at T2 Towers.
So it starts September. It's 1 a month, is that correct?
1 every 6 weeks.
1 every 6 weeks, starting in September, here in Hull at T2 HQ.
Yeah.
If you're interested, you can contact us at help@trans2performance.com. Claire and the team will give you more information. But if you've been interested in any of the elements of executive presence today and how you work on them, but to your point, establish how you stack up against some of these elements before you come through some testing, it'll be a great, rich experience for you to go through. So contact us if you're interested. Loved that. Tracy Roberts, thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll see you again soon for another People Performance podcast.
The People Performance Podcast, brought to you by T2.